Hello everyone! There's a movie I was planning to review this week, but it turns out it's not available yet, so never mind, can't do that. Instead, I'm gonna cover what else I saw in November a little early. I'll do part 1 today, and part 2 I'll do next weekend, although the video might not be ready on Saturday since that is the last day of the month. I don't think I can turn around quite that fast. We'll see. And also it is a holiday week, so things will be a little weird. It might come out on Sunday, it might come out on Monday. We'll see. Also, the subscription to the Criterion channel that my brother gave us will be wrapping up at the end of the year, so it's time to crack down on that watch list. That means that half of the movies that you're going to be hearing about from me are ones that I watched on that platform. I am trying to prioritize the rare films that I can't find anywhere else. But many of the movies on that platform are available elsewhere, so if a movie sounds interesting to you, you should search for the title on YouTube or other places, and also try your local library. You might be surprised at what they have to offer. It's both legal and free. Without further ado, here are some of the movies that I saw in November that I haven't already told you about. Number 1 is a film set in Australia, 1959's The Siege of Pinchgut. We meet 4 men on the run, one of them, Aldo Ray, a wrongfully convicted fugitive who wants to put his case before the people. When their escape is botched, the men seek refuge on a small castle island and wind up taking a family of 3 hostage. This had a great opening sequence. You have no idea who these guys are or what their deal is, whether they're good or bad. All you know is that they're trying to maintain their cover in a getaway, but everything's going wrong, so you feel kind of sorry for them. And then they take these 3 innocent people hostage, and it's like, okay. Unfortunately, what started out as an exciting crime thriller became somewhat dull in the middle, with characters over here repeating the same arguments, while characters over there rehash their options. It started to lose me. But then there are some interesting developments, and as the threat escalates, things take a darker turn, the situation spiraling out of control. I would say there's as much tragedy here as there is palpable tension. Movie number 2 is 1950's The Killer That Stalked New York. A woman smuggling diamonds into the US is unaware she's also carrying an extremely deadly disease. As she moves around Manhattan, people begin to get sick, and a bewildered team of doctors launches an intense search for patient zero. Evelyn Keyes plays our typhoid Mary, and credit to her for being willing to look absolutely wretched in almost all of her scenes. The cast includes various recognizable faces in smaller roles, like Dorothy Malone as a maybe flirtatious, maybe not nurse, and Connie Gilchrist as a nosy neighbor. There's also Lola Albright, Whit Bissell, Jim Backus, lots of folks. William Bishop co-stars as the main doctor, and Charles Corvin plays a nasty, greedy eel of a man. He's very unlikable. Criterion added this for their Noirvember series, and I guess it is a noir, but while it is a crime drama, to me it was much more an epidemic movie. Of course, its depiction of panic and mobilization felt very familiar, not just because of the madness that was 2020 and 2021 and 2022, but because while films of this sort weren't common at the time of its release, they're abundant now. I've seen quite a few of them. By comparison, this can feel dated and even tedious at a certain point. It has some solid realism, though, in its settings and photography. I'm not sure I'd call it gritty, it doesn't go that far, and the docudrama pretense is a trifle heavy-handed, but it's a decent little movie. Movie number 3 is 1967's Beach Red. This World War II film follows a group of Marines as they push forward on an island occupied by Japanese soldiers. Produced and directed by Cornell Wilde, who also plays the commanding officer, this is a combat movie loaded with action, but it also has a deeper psychological focus. After, and sometimes even during, a burst of conflict, there's a pause, a moment of troubled thought, a reflection on what was left back at home, or the reliving of some harrowing event that reminds the men how very near they are to mortality. The film's style is creative and unique, especially for its time, portraying the Marines' inner turmoil via realistic monologues, still images, distortions, repetition, rapid-fire editing, and it covers both sides, showing the Japanese experiencing these feelings as well. I found this on YouTube, and the upload looks great. It's a 1080p restoration, and it's almost startlingly clear. There's some use of stock footage that it was kind of uncanny. I feel like it should look a little grainier than it did, but it was very impressive. What I didn't like is that, number one, there's an ad break every 5 to 10 minutes. Number two, there are frequent, obnoxious reminders that pop up on the screen to like the video, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. Number three, somebody, presumably the uploader, took it upon themselves to censor the movie. They bleeped out the anti-Japanese slurs. I get not wanting to be offensive, but I find that ridiculous in a war film. It's contextual. Of course, men had derogatory terms for the enemy. You find that in pretty much every war movie. And they did a bad job of it. The beeps wipe out an entire line or two of dialogue instead of just the one word. At least it only happens 3 or 4 times, and the film itself was fine. I was searching for a war movie my parents and I hadn't seen yet that would be fitting for Veterans Day, and this turned out to be a surprisingly good choice. Not about veterans after the war, but a grim, honest depiction of the stress, anguish, and horror felt by men serving their country in a hot, hostile land. Movie number 4 came out earlier this year. I think it was at the beginning of the summer, wasn't it? A Quiet Place Day 1. In this third installment of the Alien Invasion series, Lupita Nyong'o stars as a cancer patient in hospice care who goes on what she expects to be her final trip to New York City. While there, vicious creatures appear and begin attacking anything that makes a sound, and she must figure out how to keep herself and her pet cat alive. We're now 3 movies in, and I continue to have a favorable opinion of this series. I like the marriage of scary monsters with deeply compelling human stories. I like that they keep the cast of characters limited to regular, relatable people who we get to know on an intimate level. Here we have a protagonist who is already compromised, who must decide if it's worth it to fight so hard for survival when her days are already numbered. Joseph Quinn co-stars as a guy in shock who begins hanging around her, and Jimon Honsu plays a small role that ties this film to the second one. I still think these are interesting and spooky aliens. However, I will say that with all the extremely close calls here, I began to wonder how, with such acute hearing, they're not able to detect someone's heart beating or blood rushing through veins. I do still admire the originality of the concept and design. I just wonder why I felt I saw less of them in this one when there were actually many more than in the first 2. My mom and I enjoyed the first 2 films a lot. In some ways, I liked Part 2 better than Part 1. As for this third entry, I know opinions are divided, but for me, there's no competition. A Quiet Place Day 1, which was directed by Michael Sarnowski, not John Krasinski, as the first 2 were, is clearly in third place. It doesn't really offer anything new, some of the whispered dialogue was hard to understand, and the pace lagged in the second half. But I wouldn't call it the worst. I just didn't like it as well as the others. It was still a very good film. Movie number 5 is 1978's Someone's Watching Me. In this thriller, written and directed by John Carpenter, Lauren Hutton stars as a TV director who's just moved to LA. She's got a new job and a swanky new place, and everything's going great until somebody starts making crank calls and sending strange gifts. To be perfectly honest, I kind of don't like watching stalker horror movies like this anymore. It was never a favorite subgenre of mine anyway, but in the last few years, I've come to feel differently about these kinds of movies, and I think I've started to avoid them. There have been movies that I looked up and then I saw what they were about, and I was like, you know what? I don't need to watch that. It's just not entertainment, not purely entertainment for me anymore. I can still enjoy them, but it's just too real, too plausible, uncomfortable. So when I saw this listed on Criterion a few weeks ago, I thought, I'm kind of interested. It could be good, but maybe I should give it a pass. However, the fact that it has been a somewhat rare John Carpenter TV movie is intriguing, and I was curious to see Lauren Hutton star in a horror film. Remember last time I talked about Connie Stevens starring in Two on a Guillotine, and I said that I knew her from her appearances on HSN 20 plus years ago selling skincare and perfume. Well, same goes for Lauren Hutton. She also had a line of beauty stuff that she sold on HSN, and so I was familiar with her from that. I knew she was a model, but I never realized that she also had an acting career. I thought she was really good here. She's full of confidence and vigor. She's got some baggage, but she's looking forward. She has a tendency to kid around, and she often talks to herself, which is relatable. Hutton struck me as a natural at playing this type, but she also succeeds in portraying the heroine's emotional decline, her curiosity and confusion giving way to paranoia, terror, and desperation. My mom was irritated by some of the things she did, like leaving her curtains open all the time and going to check things out by herself. My mom hates it when characters do things like that, but I always argue that in a movie like this, that stuff has to happen for the plot to advance. As for Carpenter's direction, I thought that was very good too. Granted, the visuals and camera work are obviously inspired by Alfred Hitchcock, but I don't say that as a criticism, like, oh, this is so unoriginal. Lots of filmmakers were inspired by Hitchcock, and once I noticed it, and once I felt like this is kind of a tribute film, it was fun to make note of angles and zooms and what have you that I could specifically connect to other films. There are also similarities between this and Carpenter's Halloween. Both are effective, lower-budget horror thrillers with a female protagonist being tormented by a stalker. Halloween came out in October 1978. This aired on TV in November. I would say the biggest difference, besides that this is not a teen-centric slasher, is that Carpenter did not do the music for this one. So if you're a fan of his synth scores, that is a glaring absence. But it's a solid film, I think. Not one you hear mentioned much. It's definitely eclipsed by his later work. But I liked it more than some of his other films I've seen, and for me, it was quite tense. And movie number 6 is kind of a rewatch. I saw the second half of the film some years ago. It's 1951's On Dangerous Ground. In this Nicholas Ray-directed noir, Robert Ryan plays a bitter city cop who's been reprimanded for getting too rough with suspects. He's sent to assist in a murder case way up north, where he encounters a blind woman, played by Ida Lupino, who may be harboring a fugitive. I really like this movie. It takes a basic, sometimes kind of stale concept and does something fresh with it. And I appreciate all the things the film does that help it stand apart from other films in the genre. Both Ryan and Lupino give strong performances, as do the supporting actors, including Ward Bond as a revenge-hungry father. The film is short and simple, a quick 81 minutes, but it neatly tells a well-developed story about characters getting tangled up in a complicated situation. There aren't a lot of wintry noirs out there, so the snowy landscapes are striking. Poor Robert Ryan and Ward Bond have to chase somebody through at least half a foot of snow, and they're slipping and sliding all over the place. The film also features a stirring Bernard Herrmann score, which does bear a strong resemblance to some of his later, more famous compositions for Hitchcock's films. There was a moment when my mom and I looked at each other and I said, "That's Vertigo right there," and she said, "Yeah, and I think a little Psycho." Again, that's not a criticism. If you're looking for a classic noir that's a bit off the beaten path, a little more dramatic and character-driven and bittersweet, I recommend this one. I was glad to see it again, and to see all of it this time, and it turns out I had totally misremembered the ending. So that was a surprise. And that's it for part 1. I hope you enjoyed this collection of reviews. As usual, you can find a list of the films and where/how I watched them in the description. Go ahead and share your thoughts on any of these movies in the comments below if you like, and I'll be back sometime next weekend with part 2. Thanks for watching.